Would you hire me for just $1 an hour? One day, a man appeared before me, asking for a job at the long-established inn I was struggling to keep afloat. To my surprise, the man was an elderly gentleman leaning on a cane. What kind of work could this guy possibly do? He was so frail that I was ready to turn him down and send him on his way. But then, all right, I'll hire you for $3,000 a month. Are you serious? For a certain reason, I decided to let the old man work. Then, just 3 days later, we've got a problem. There's a huge line outside, at least 100 people. What? The old man's arrival brought an unbelievable change to our once empty inn. Because his true identity was. Phew, it's getting cooler a bit, but it's still very warm. It was the end of August, and the lingering summer heat could still be felt in the morning air. As I wiped the sweat from my forehead, I focused on my daily routine, cleaning the entrance of the inn. In the distance, cicadas buzzed as if mourning the end of summer. My name is Michael, 28 years old. I am the fifth-generation owner of Evergreen Inn, a 150-year-old traditional inn nestled quietly at the foot of Mount Fuji. I never imagined I would be carrying such a long history on my shoulders at this age. Just a few years ago, it was beyond my wildest dreams. Evergreen Inn's pride lies first in its breathtaking view of Mount Fuji. The sight of the mountain from our spacious Japanese-style rooms is stunning, offering a different charm with each passing season. Our natural hot spring, flowing directly from the source, gently nourishes the skin, healing both body and soul. The bliss of soaking in the bath while gazing at the starry night sky has long been loved by our guests. And above all, our traditional cuisine, passed down through generations, is simply exquisite. Using seasonal delicacies from the mountains and rivers, our dishes are crafted to delight both the palate and the eyes. Good morning, Michael. We've got some top-quality fish for breakfast today. Michael, about the roof repairs. For someone as inexperienced as me, running the inn is far from easy. Managing finances, negotiating with suppliers, and maintaining the facilities. There's always something that needs to be done. Still, I am determined to protect Evergreen Inn, the inn my grandfather entrusted to me. And I'm not alone. I have a team of dedicated staff to rely on. Experienced employees like our head chef, William, who has been here since my grandfather's time, support both the inn's traditions and my own inexperience. I can't afford to fall behind everyone else. Every time I see my team working hard, I renew my resolve and push myself even further. But honestly, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. Michael, do you have a moment? As I was reviewing the books in the office after finishing my morning tasks, my mother, Margaret, who runs the inn as the landlady, knocked and peeked in. How are the reservations looking for September? Well, I hesitated to answer her question. Just thinking about it sent a cold sweat down my back. I've been trying to boost our presence on social media, but the travel season may be over, but the numbers have dropped even more. My mother and I exchanged worried glances. There was a time when Evergreen Inn was fully booked every night, with a waitlist for cancellations being the norm, but now, the situation is the complete opposite. If we were lucky, we'd get 10 reservations a month, and for next month, we had only 3. And all of them were from longtime regulars. At this rate, we wouldn't be able to keep the business running, and 150 years of history would end with my generation. That was the dire situation Evergreen Inn had been pushed into. The decline in customers was already a problem back in Grandpa's day, but I never imagined something like that would be built so close by. I sighed deeply as I glanced out the window. Just a short distance from Evergreen Inn, a luxury resort hotel had opened a year ago. Its impact was far greater than I had expected. A suite with an open-air bath offering a panoramic view of Mount Fuji. A 24-hour spa with an attached high-end salon. a restaurant led by a Michelin-starred chef, just to name a few. The hotel was run by a savvy owner who had been rapidly expanding a chain of luxury hotels in major cities, offering extravagant services one after another. Evergreen Inn, struggling just to stay afloat day by day, had no way to compete, and we were losing guests at an alarming rate. Grandpa, what am I supposed to do? Overwhelmed by the harsh reality, I found myself calling out to the grandfather who was no longer here. The fourth-generation owner of Evergreen Inn, my grandfather, had passed away 2 years ago. And 3 years before that, my father, who was supposed to be the fifth-generation owner, had died suddenly in an accident. In my father's place, my grandfather entrusted me with the future of Evergreen Inn. But now? Huh? At that moment, I suddenly lifted my head as if something had pulled me from my thoughts. I jumped up and rushed out of the office. Michael? Ignoring my mother's voice, I hurried to the entrance. Grandpa? I knew it was impossible, yet I couldn't stop myself from calling out. Because I had just heard the familiar sound of my grandfather's footsteps on the gravel outside. Then, as the footsteps stopped, the sliding door at the entrance creaked open. Standing before me was, "Excuse me, is this Evergreen Inn?" A frail, raspy voice rang surprisingly clearly through the entrance. It came from an old man with a hunched back, gripping a cane tightly with his wrinkled hands. "Yes, it is. Are you here to stay with us?" There were no reservations for today, so he must have been a walk-in guest. As I spoke, the old man's deeply lined face softened with relief. Then he shook his head. No. Then? He wasn't the local farmer who sometimes brought us fresh vegetables, nor the carpenter we often hired for repairs. I was good at remembering faces due to my job, but I had never seen this old man before. Still, for some reason, his footsteps had sounded just like my grandfather's. "My name is Edgar. By any chance, are you the grandson of Edward?" Huh? Yes. How did he know my grandfather's name? As I stood there in shock, the old man said something even more surprising. "I have a favor. Would you allow me to work here?" What? I don't need a salary, so even $1 a day or nothing at all would be fine. Just being able to work here would be enough for me. As he said that, Edgar attempted to bow deeply, but... ouch. He must have had a bad back. Halfway through his bow, he grimaced and trembled, his legs shaking. Seeing him like that, I couldn't hide my confusion. Even if he said he didn't need a salary, what kind of work could such a frail old man possibly do? "Is something wrong, Michael?" Just then, my mother, Margaret, worried that I hadn't returned, came over. "Oh my, and who might this be?" She looked at Edgar in surprise. I quietly explained the situation. "This old man wants to work here. What should we do?" "What?" My mother furrowed her brows and scolded me in a hushed but firm tone. "That's impossible. We're already struggling, cutting back on housekeepers and kitchen staff just to stay afloat." "Yeah, you're right." Evergreen Inn had no room to take on new hires. It felt rude to think this way, but this old man looked like he needed a caretaker more than a job. "I'm sorry you came all this way, but..." I told him we couldn't hire him. But he refused to give up. "Please, I beg you, I'll do anything." "It's not that simple. I have nowhere else to go. The restaurant I worked at suddenly went out of business the other day." "What?" His words shook me. "Edgar, what kind of work did you do before?" "I was a chef." "And how much was your salary there?" "Michael?" My mother tugged at the sleeve of my coat, whispering, "What are you suddenly asking?" Edgar, looking a bit puzzled, replied, "About $2,000 a month." "I see." Taking a deep breath, I stepped down onto the dirt floor where he stood, meeting his gaze. "All right, then you can work here. I'll pay you $3,000 a month." "Michael!" My mother cried out in shock, rushing to my side. What are you thinking? We can't afford that. I know, Mom, but… Somehow, I had a gut feeling that this decision would save Evergreen Inn, despite how desperate our situation was. It was just intuition. Michael. My mother stared at me, speechless. Then she let out a long, deep sigh. You're just like him. Ah, that man. Your grandfather was the same way, always making these outrageous decisions. And for some reason, they always worked out. She gave me a tired but amused smile. Hearing that, I couldn't help but grin as well. Are you sure? Do as you like. You're the owner of Evergreen Inn now. Mom, thank you. I bowed my head to my mother, then turned back to Edgar. Edgar, I look forward to working with you. Are you sure, hiring an old man like me? Yes, please start as soon as tomorrow. Oh, thank you so much. Overcome with emotion, Edgar dropped his cane in excitement. His eyes even glistened with tears. By the way, if I may ask, how is your grandfather doing? My grandfather is. When I told him that my grandfather had passed away 2 years ago due to illness, Edgar's shoulders slumped. I see. His eyes welled up instantly, and a single tear traced down his cheek. What kind of connection did he have with my grandfather? Before I could ask, Edgar bowed deeply. Then, I will be in your care starting tomorrow. I look forward to working with you. The same to you. Welcome, Edgar. I reached out my hand, and he clasped it with both of his. His grip was gentle yet unexpectedly firm. This feeling. Maybe, just maybe, his presence would change something. No, I needed it to change. Feeling the strength in his handshake, I could only hope my instincts were right. Early the next morning, I barely finished sweeping the entrance before heading toward the kitchen in the back of Evergreen Inn. I couldn't help but feel concerned about Edgar's first day at work. My name is Edgar. It's a pleasure to meet you all. With his back turned to me, Edgar was bowing deeply to the line of chefs in the kitchen with utmost respect. But as he lifted his head, his footing suddenly wobbled. Oh. Edgar, are you all right? I rushed over and steadied him. Michael, yes, my apologies. Please be careful. Ah, well, I am 78 years old. My body is still stiff in the mornings. Edgar chuckled apologetically, lowering his brows in embarrassment. The chefs, however, watched with concerned expressions. Michael, do you have a moment? A little past 9 a.m., after the breakfast cleanup had settled down, I happened to walk by the kitchen when William, the head chef, poked his head out. Are you sure about hiring Edgar? Since he couldn't use his cane in the kitchen, his footing was unsteady. He didn't have the strength to carry heavy items, and even the slightest movement left him short of breath. Instead of being an extra hand, he was slowing the others down as they worried about him, making service take longer than usual. William reported all of this with a tense expression. Yeah, to be honest, I'm a little worried too. Then why? Can you give it a little more time, William? Actually, I have an idea. What? Are you serious? William was so shocked by my proposal that he was momentarily speechless. Recently, to help Evergreen Inn overcome its financial struggles, I had come up with a new service. A day trip plan where guests could enjoy our renowned hot springs and course lunch without staying overnight. The new day trip plan had been surprisingly well received. As lunchtime approached, the kitchen became increasingly busy with preparations. And then, Edgar, would you be willing to handle one dish for today's lunch service? Me? At William's words, Edgar blinked in surprise. Immediately, murmurs spread through the kitchen. William? Are you serious? Right now in the middle of a rush? It was Michael's decision. I had my doubts too, but Edgar, can I count on you? Well, trusting my instincts, William pushed forward with the decision despite the opposition. And then, after lunch service had ended, William rushed into my office, looking flustered. Michael, this is huge. What happened? Did something go wrong with Edgar? No, it's incredible. Huh? For the first time ever, William's usually composed expression was glowing with excitement. He repeated, almost breathlessly, Edgar is amazing. The moment he picked up a knife, his hands stopped shaking completely. His back straightened, and then he started filleting fish at an unbelievable speed. His handling of ingredients, his seasoning, and his plating, every movement was precise, elegant, and without hesitation. As William passionately explained, he grabbed my arm and insisted, "You have to see this for yourself," pulling me toward the kitchen. And what I saw there was, Edgar, what should I do if the soy sauce is too strong? That decorative cut was stunning. Could you teach me how you did it? Just hours ago, none of the kitchen staff had expected anything from Edgar. But now they were gathered around him, eyes filled with admiration, eagerly asking him for advice. Though slightly embarrassed, Edgar answered each question with a warm and humble smile. This man is no ordinary chef. Michael, I think you may have hired someone truly extraordinary. Yeah. I couldn't hide my shock at how well things had turned out. Day by day, Edgar became more integrated into the kitchen. His skills and personality made him a trusted figure among the other chefs. Rather than feeling overshadowed by Edgar's growing admiration from the staff, William surprised me by trusting him as both a senior chef and a colleague, saying, "Edgar, I've been working on a new autumn menu. Would you mind taking a look?" But then, one day, an unexpected piece of news shook Evergreen in. Michael, something terrible has happened. My mother turned to me, panic in her eyes as she hung up the phone. William, he was in a car accident. He's been taken to the hospital. What? On his way to work, William had been hit by a car. I rushed to the hospital immediately, and thankfully, his injuries weren't life-threatening. However, with multiple fractures and bruises, he would be hospitalized for at least a month. Michael, what do we do? Back at Evergreen Inn, the kitchen staff had gathered, their faces filled with worry. Without William, who's going to lead the kitchen? Just when we were finally starting to get more customers. To make matters worse, the sous chef, William's right-hand man, had just quit a few days ago. As anxiety filled the room, I felt my own unease growing. At that moment, a young chef suddenly raised his voice and called out, "Edgar, please take over." That's right, if it's Edgar. Could you take charge of the kitchen for us? One voice after another rose in agreement. Before long, every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on Edgar. Me? Edgar looked slightly surprised, but his expression quickly turned serious as he turned to face me directly. Michael, what shall we do? Edgar. Seeing the determination in his gaze, I made up my mind. Please, Edgar, I want you to be the acting head chef. I see, understood. With a firm nod, Edgar tightened the strings of his apron as if bracing himself for the task ahead. All right then, let's get started. Everyone get to your stations. Yes, sir. At Edgar's command, the chefs sprang into action. And then, during that day's lunch service, something unusual happened at Evergreen Inn. This is amazing. It was always good, but today it's exceptional. It tastes both nostalgic and new at the same time. I can really taste the natural flavors of the ingredients. The customers' reactions were noticeably different from the day before. There were more smiles, more murmurs of appreciation. Then, the following day. Michael! One of the housekeepers burst into my office, breathless with excitement. What's going on? It's incredible. There's a line of customers outside the entrance. What? I rushed to the front, only to be met with a shocking sight. A dozen or more customers were lined up outside. I've never seen anything like this, not even in your father's time. My mother muttered in shock before rushing off to help manage the situation. And the day after that. Michael, we have over 30 customers in line today. And the next day after that. There are 100 people. A line of 100 people. You've got to be kidding. Tearing outside cautiously, I couldn't believe my eyes. The line stretched from the entrance of Evergreen Inn all the way down the hill, disappearing into the distance. What is happening? Michael, look at this. My mother, looking pale from the overwhelming situation, held up her phone. And that's when I saw the reason behind the madness. A hidden gem at the foot of Mount Fuji, Evergreen Inn. Their day trip lunch is incredible, a stunning fusion of tradition and innovation, beautifully plated and absolutely delicious. You have to try it. It turned out that on Edgar's first day as acting head chef, a well-known food influencer had dined at our inn. Their post had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media. What do we do? There's no way we can handle this many orders. We don't even have enough ingredients. The sudden flood of customers threw the kitchen into total chaos. Amid the confusion and panic, Edgar spoke up, his voice calm yet commanding. Everyone, please stay calm. With just that one sentence, the chaotic kitchen fell into complete silence. First, let's check our current stock. You go to the storage room. Yes. The assigned chef immediately sprinted off. You contact our suppliers. We'll likely need more ingredients. Understood. And you? Edgar's instructions were calm, clear, and easy for everyone to follow. Slowly, the panic that had gripped the kitchen began to subside. Listen up, everyone. While beginning his own preparations, Edgar raised his voice. Yes, this is a difficult situation, but all of you are highly skilled chefs. More importantly, these customers have come all this way because they want our food. Let's meet their expectations with excellence. At those words, the chef's eyes lit up with determination. Now, let's work together and make the best dishes possible. Yes, sir. Their strong voices rang through the kitchen. Satisfied that things were under control, I stepped away. I had my own responsibilities as the owner of Evergreen Inn, so I couldn't afford to fall behind. Let's start handing out numbered tickets. Anyone available, help out. That day became the busiest lunchtime Evergreen Inn had seen in over a decade, but with the entire staff working together, we somehow pulled through. Not a single customer was turned away, and every guest received their meal, all thanks to Edgar. When we ran out of additional ingredients, he quickly adjusted the menu. And the dishes he created were so refined and delicious that no one even thought to complain. Thank you so much, Edgar. Speaking on behalf of the entire staff, I expressed my gratitude, but Edgar simply smiled and quietly shook his head. This is only the beginning, Michael. What? This inn is capable of much more, isn't it? As if proving his words, Evergreen Inn began to transform after that day. Every lunchtime, a line formed outside the entrance, growing longer each day as word of mouth spread. Guests who had been captivated by our lunch started making reservations for dinner and overnight stays. Michael, we've surpassed 20 reservations this month. For the first time in a long while, my mother's voice was filled with excitement. The gloom that had hung over the staff was beginning to lift. And it was all thanks to Edgar. Thank you so much, Edgar. But who exactly are you? He no longer seemed like just a chef. Who exactly are you? The question kept growing larger in my mind. One early morning, not long after. As usual, I was sweeping the entrance of Evergreen Inn when I heard footsteps approaching from the hill below. Excuse me, is this Evergreen Inn? The person who had just reached the top of the hill spotted me and hurried over. The moment I saw her, I instinctively held my breath. Her long black hair shimmered in the morning sunlight, flowing gracefully with each movement. Her porcelain white skin was flawless, and her soft pink lips curved into a gentle shape. The pure white dress she wore perfectly complemented her elegant and delicate presence. She looked like she had stepped right out of a television screen or a magazine, an astonishingly beautiful young woman. Yes, this is Evergreen Inn. Really? That's a relief. The young woman beamed with a radiant smile, looking visibly relieved. Once again, I found myself captivated by her beauty. But when I learned who she was, admiring her looks became the least of my concerns. My name is Caroline. I believe my grandfather is staying here. His name is Edgar. The moment I heard that name, I couldn't help but shout. Edgar? So, he is here after all. Yeah. Still overwhelmed by surprise, I nodded. At that moment, Caroline's smile faded and her expression turned serious. I need to speak with my grandfather. Could you let me see him? Ah. Just then. Oh, there you are, Michael. Do you have a moment? I need to discuss the supply orders with you. Edgar appeared at the entrance, looking for me. And then, Caroline? The moment he laid eyes on her, his expression froze. Grandpa. Caroline ran straight to Edgar, throwing herself into his arms. Tears glistened faintly in her eyes. I've missed you, Grandpa. Caroline. Sensing there was more to this reunion, I led them to my office. Once inside, Caroline pulled out her phone and held it up for Edgar to see. I saw this on social media. The moment I saw this dish, I knew. This is your cooking, Grandpa. You figured it out that easily? Of course. Just look at the decorative cuts. You did them the same way as at Everglow. What? Everglow? I blurted out in shock, interrupting their conversation. Because that name was... Wait, Edgar, you worked at Everglow? You didn't know? Grandpa, you never told them? Ah, well, I guess I just forgot to mention it. Edgar chuckled, scratching his head. I couldn't hide my shock. Everglow was one of the most prestigious high-end Japanese restaurants in Tokyo. An exclusive, members-only establishment where only a select few could dine. It had held Michelin stars for over 20 years. But if I remember correctly, Everglow was. Yes, due to various circumstances, it recently closed down. My grandfather was the head chef there for many years. The head chef? That meant he wasn't just any chef, and he had been one of the very best in Japan. And I had hired this legendary figure for just $3,000 a month. Grandpa's cooking is like magic. He brings out the full potential of each ingredient, creating flavors you'd never imagine. Once you taste his food, you'll never want to eat anywhere else again. She spoke with admiration, her eyes sparkling and looking almost enchanted. Still reeling from the revelation, I nodded in agreement. I understand now. Edgar's cooking is truly incredible, and now I know why. Oh, come on, Michael, not you too. Even though Edgar hunched his shoulders in embarrassment, looking like nothing more than an ordinary old man, I could already picture William and the other chefs who admired him collapsing in shock once they found out the truth. Since I was getting older, I offered to retire, but the owner begged me to stay on. So in the end, I was only working a few days a month, training the next generation of chefs. Honestly, I was just an old man with a fancy title by the time the restaurant closed. So that's how it was. The moment he held a knife, he became a completely different person. His calm and precise instructions effortlessly led an entire team of chefs. And most of all, his almost divine culinary skills had the power to move people's hearts. Finally, everything clicked in my mind. Grandpa, the owner was worried when you suddenly disappeared without a word. And of course, I was too. Why did you just leave like that? I'm sorry about that, but Caroline. Come back to Tokyo with me. Let's go home together. As I watched the exchange between Edgar and Caroline, I found myself reflecting. It was nearly a month since Edgar had arrived at Evergreen Inn. In that short time, I couldn't even begin to count how much he had helped us. As a token of my gratitude, I planned to give him a little more than the $3,000 salary. After all, he would likely be leaving with Caroline soon. But then, no, I'm not going back to Tokyo. What? Wait, what? Caroline and I spoke at the same time, equally stunned. I'd like to continue working here, if that's all right with you, Michael. Edgar, of course, that would be a huge help, but Caroline had come all this way to bring him back. Just as I was about to say that, Grandpa. Suddenly, Caroline sprang up from her chair, dropped to her knees at Edgar's feet, and clung to him desperately. Grandpa, I haven't given up yet. I still want to learn how to cook from you. Caroline. Listen to me, Grandpa. I saved up money while training at a restaurant. Let's live together in Tokyo. I'll take care of you. I just want you to stay by my side and teach me how to cook. Her eyes were filled with unwavering determination as she looked straight up at Edgar. But Edgar averted his gaze, his expression darkening. That's exactly why I left. No matter how much I opposed it, you wouldn't give up. I won't give up. Never. I will become a chef. Caroline. Edgar firmly placed both hands on her shoulders and gently but decisively pushed her away. Yet even then, Caroline didn't look away. Taking a deep breath, she began speaking in a quiet but steady voice. Grandpa, when I was 5, my parents died in that accident, remember? After that, you were the one who raised me. Yes. I was heartbroken, lonely, and I couldn't even eat. But you never stopped cooking for me. You adjusted the flavors to make it easier for me to eat and made the dishes look beautiful to cheer me up every single day. And because of that, I was able to get through the hardest time in my life. Caroline. Perhaps recalling those days, Edgar's voice trembled as he gazed at her. Caroline gently placed her hands over his. You said, you'll never survive in the harsh world of professional cooking. And now I understand exactly what you meant. After culinary school, I started training at a traditional restaurant, and I finally realized how tough it really is. But not once did I ever think about giving up. I want to carry on the delicious, wonderful, and heartwarming dishes that you taught me. Just like you did for me. I want to heal people's hearts through food. That is my dream. Caroline. Edgar closed his eyes and let out a long, deep sigh. I understand how you feel, but my decision hasn't changed. I won't return to Tokyo. Grandpa. As Edgar shook his head, Caroline's face twisted as if she were about to cry. At that moment, before I even realized it, the words slipped from my mouth. Caroline, why don't you work here? Huh? Michael? Both of them looked at me in surprise. Why not train under Edgar while working here at Evergreen Inn? Wait, are you serious? Caroline shot up from her seat, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Meanwhile, Edgar furrowed his brows. Michael, why? I responded to his question. The reason was her hands. Caroline has the same hands as you, Edgar. What? Edgar widened his eyes and stared at them. His granddaughter's pale hands resting atop his own. Scarred with burns and cuts, her fingers bore the marks of a life dedicated to cooking. These are the hands of someone who takes cooking seriously. That's why I decided to hire Edgar in the first place. I had a feeling that he might be the one to change Evergreen Inn. Edgar remained silent, staring at Caroline's hands for a long moment. Then, he shifted his gaze to his own. And after a deep, heavy silence, he slowly nodded. All right. Grandpa, does that mean? Let me be clear, I won't go easy on you just because you're my granddaughter. Back at Everglow, my training was harsh enough to make grown men break down and run away. Do you have the resolve to endure that, Caroline? A gulp echoed in the quiet office. Then, slowly but firmly, Caroline nodded. Of course. Please teach me, Grandpa. Well, I'm the acting head chef now. Understood. Please train me, sir. Her expression tightened with determination as she bowed deeply. Then she turned to me. I'm looking forward to working with you, Michael. Same here. Welcome aboard, Caroline. As Edgar watched our exchange, his face held a mix of emotions, complex yet undeniably pleased. Then from that day on, my name is Caroline. Please teach me with strict guidance. Caroline officially joined Evergreen Inn as an apprentice chef. Starting the very next morning, she was always the first to arrive. Before anyone else stepped foot into the dimly lit kitchen, she quietly began cleaning. Once everything gleamed, she moved on to her prep work, tasks assigned by Edgar, which she completed alone. Caroline, that's not how you hold a knife. I never taught you to handle it like that. This broth is unacceptable. Throw it out and do it over. Edgar showed no mercy. It was hard to believe he was training his own granddaughter, or maybe that was exactly why. Now that the other chefs knew his true identity and had seen him transform into someone entirely different in the kitchen, they were left shaken. Understood. I'll redo it immediately. Caroline never complained. She never cut corners, never backed down, and she clung to Edgar's lessons with everything she had. Her determination soon began to inspire the rest of the kitchen staff. Edgar, teach us with the same discipline. We'll push ourselves too, just like Caroline. Everyone. The entire kitchen became filled with newfound energy, and the quality of Evergreen Inn's cuisine rose higher with each passing day. As word spread through social media and online reviews, the number of customers continued to grow steadily. If this momentum keeps up, we'll be able to bring back the old Evergreen Inn. I need to work even harder. Inspired by Caroline and the others, I poured even more effort into running the inn. Then, one night. Huh? Is someone there? While making my usual rounds through the building, I froze in place. The kitchen was completely dark, so there shouldn't have been anyone there. But then, I heard the sound of someone softly sobbing. Who's there? Wait, Caroline. Michael. When I turned on the lights, I saw Caroline curled up in the corner of the kitchen crying. I'm sorry, I'll go home now. Did something happen? I asked gently, and she hesitated, lowering her gaze. Then, in a small voice, she admitted why she had been crying. I didn't want to go back to the apartment where Grandpa and I live. Today, in front of everyone, he scolded me harsher than ever before. I froze, and at the same time, a sharp pain tightened in my chest. She hadn't been enduring Edgar's harsh training without complaint. She had been silently holding back her tears, struggling to endure it all on her own. Caroline. I stepped down into the kitchen and knelt beside her trembling shoulders. When it's tough, it's okay to say it's tough. Huh? When I was learning how to run the inn, my mother, the landlady, was extremely strict with me. If that was all there had been, I might have given up. But I didn't run away because everyone around me encouraged me. They listened when I needed to vent, and when things got hard, they let me say it out loud. That's why, Caroline. Michael. She looked up at me, her eyes welling with fresh tears. I gently wiped a teardrop from her cheek with my finger. Thank you, Michael. Right now, I feel really overwhelmed. I know. But I won't give up. It's hard, but it's also so much fun. She smiled brightly, her expression radiant. Bathed in the light of the full moon shining through the window, her smile seemed to glow with an almost radiant brilliance, and I instinctively held my breath as my heart suddenly began to race. From that night on, Caroline and I began to grow closer. Good morning, Michael. I'm ready to give it my all today. Every morning when I stopped by the kitchen, Caroline greeted me with a cheerful smile. And before I knew it, seeing that smile had become my secret source of joy. Michael, please take this. One evening after work, Caroline came to my office holding a small container. This is a rolled omelet? I was finally allowed to make one. I had to redo it so many times, but this is the first one that got approved, so I wanted you to have it. For me, is to thank you for encouraging me the other day. I really appreciate it. When I looked up, I saw her cheeks tinged with a faint blush as she smiled. My heart skipped a beat. For some reason, she looked even more beautiful than usual today. Thanks, I was getting a little hungry anyway, so I'll dig in. Trying to hide my nervousness, I quickly opened the container. And the moment I took a bite of the beautifully golden rolled omelet. Wait, what? I stared in shock, because the taste was exactly the same as Edgar's cooking. No, it might have been even more delicate and gentle. Caroline, this is incredible. Really? You mean it? Yeah, you have real talent for cooking. I'm sure Edgar will recognize it too. Caroline's face lit up, glowing like a sunflower in full bloom under the summer sun. And in that moment, I finally realized something, that I was starting to fall for her. It might take time, but I want Grandpa to acknowledge me someday. But honestly, hearing you praise me makes me the happiest. What? I should go now. She suddenly bolted from the office, her footsteps echoing as she ran away. Her face was flushed bright red, all the way to her ears. But just as things were looking up, an unexpected crisis struck Evergreen in. Michael, we have a problem. It all started when my mother rushed over to me in a panic. In her hands, she clutched the tablet we used to manage reservations. What's wrong, Mom? This is bad. 5 reservations for next week just got canceled all at once. What? I was at a loss for words. Recently, thanks to Caroline joining the team, our bookings had been on the rise. But now, it's strange. None of them gave a reason, and they all just said, we can't make it anymore. This has never happened before. There was clear concern in my mother's eyes. Having managed the inn for years, she could tell this situation wasn't normal. Sometimes things like this just happen by coincidence. We still have plenty of reservations. I'm sure everything will be fine. I hope so. Despite a faint uneasiness creeping in, I reassured my mother. But this was just the beginning. A few days later after that, Michael, it's serious. This time, a housekeeper rushed into my office. There are negative reviews about Evergreen and spreading on social media. What? I immediately grabbed my phone and searched for the inn's name. And what I found was, Evergreen Inn's food quality has dropped. The staff service is terrible. The public bath is covered in mold, absolutely disgusting. The list went on, and all of the posts were completely false. This is awful. Why is this happening? More reservations are being canceled, and this must be the reason. Damn, we need to act fast. We jumped into action immediately. To counter the false claims, we posted photos of our spotless, well-maintained bathhouse and highlighted the continued high praise for our food and service. We also organized training sessions for each department, ensuring that our customer service was better than ever. But the negative reviews kept spreading one after another, and the wave of cancellations continued. Just when Evergreen Inn had been on the brink of revival, we were being pushed to the edge once again. Then, one day, Michael, there's a guest here to see you. With a slightly tense expression, my mother led me toward the entrance. And waiting there was. Well, Michael from Evergreen Inn. It's been a while since I greeted you at our grand opening, hasn't it? A man strode in with a smug air about him. One of the main reasons for Evergreen Inn's decline stood right across the street, the owner of the luxury hotel Shark Royal Resort, Daniel. Is there something you need? Oh, come now, no need to be so defensive. We're neighbors, after all. Shouldn't we be on good terms? His tone was as fake as his concern, and my expression hardened further. I had heard about his methods after experiencing them firsthand. He deliberately built his high-end resorts near existing inns and hotels, offering even more extravagant services. By luring away all the customers, his Shark Resort group had been expanding at an alarming rate. By the way, I heard you were doing quite well for a while. But now things seem rather difficult at Evergreen Inn, don't they? Daniel's greasy face twisted into a chilling smirk. At that moment, an intense gut feeling hit me. Could he be behind the recent string of troubles? As if reading my thoughts, Daniel glanced around the inn before turning back to me. If you'd like, I can help you out. What? I mean resolving your little troubles. With the power of my group, it would be effortless. We could wipe away all those nasty rumors on social media in no time. I stayed silent, and his grin widened as he added, however, I'd like you to hand over Edgar. Let him work at my hotel instead. What? How does he know about Edgar? I gasped as Daniel continued, almost to himself. So he really is here. Took me long enough to track him down. Well, that just proves how valuable a title like former head chef of Everglow is. He's going to make me a lot of money. You've been after Edgar from the start? My voice shook with anger. Daniel gave a feigned, innocent smile and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, before suddenly leaning in close to my ear. If you hand him over, all these recent misfortunes will disappear immediately. Daniel. So it was him. Blood rushed to my head as I glared at him with all the fury I could muster. Then, I refuse. A calm yet resolute voice echoed down the hallway. Edgar. Michael, if you'll allow me this request, I would like to continue working at Evergreen Inn for a while longer. He turned to me with a gentle smile, then faced Daniel again, speaking firmly. I will not be moving to your hotel. No matter how much money you offer, my decision will not change. So from now on, stop harassing this inn. His voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of a man who had commanded respect for decades. Even Daniel hesitated for a moment. You'll regret this, old man. Thanks to you, Evergreen Inn is finished. Spewing his final threat, Daniel stormed out of the entrance, his footsteps heavy with frustration. Though I was relieved and grateful that Edgar had chosen to stay, a deep unease settled in my chest. And soon enough, my worst fears came true. Michael, this is bad. My mother burst into my office, her face pale as a sheet. Seeing her in such a state sent a terrible feeling crawling up my spine. What now? Oh no! My mother could no longer stand and collapsed onto the floor. I rushed to her side asking what had happened, and her response was far worse than anything I could have imagined. A group reservation for 50 guests scheduled for the next 3 days. They just called to cancel. What? My vision went dark for a moment. This was the largest reservation we had received in months, booked more than half a year ago. We had poured our energy into preparing the best meals and accommodations, ensuring everything was perfect. Why now, all of a sudden? What reason did they give? They said it's because of food poisoning. They claimed this Evergreen Inn was responsible. What? Food poisoning. It was one of the worst crises an inn could face. A single accusation could destroy trust and, in the worst case, make it impossible to continue operating. But we haven't received any reports like that. Our hygiene management is meticulous. Are they confusing us with another inn? No, it's spreading on social media again. Rumors saying I got food poisoning after eating at Evergreen Inn. It's spreading like wildfire. This can't be happening. Damn it, we've been set up. I slammed my fist onto the desk. There was no doubt in my mind. This had Daniel's fingerprints all over it. But there was no way to prove it. What are we supposed to do? A last-minute cancellation of such a large group was a devastating blow to our already struggling finances. To make things worse, the group's representative insisted that they wouldn't pay a cancellation fee because it was the inn's fault. The situation was as disastrous as it could get, and the timing couldn't have been worse. The one person I could always rely on, Edgar, had taken a 4-day leave due to his worsening back pain. Is this the end? I collapsed into my chair. For generations, we had managed to protect the 150-year legacy of Evergreen Inn, overcoming countless challenges. Was this where it all came to an end? I'm sorry, Grandpa, I let this happen. A vision of my grandfather crossed my mind, and a crushing guilt weighed down on my chest. Just then, excuse me. Peeking in from behind the door, her face filled with concern, was Caroline. Caroline, why are you here? I heard people talking about something terrible happening. Are you okay, Michael? Oh. She had come all the way here just to check on me. Lifting my head, I met her gaze. But when I opened my mouth to speak, my voice lacked even a hint of strength. Caroline, there's nothing we can do anymore. What? Evergreen Inn might really be finished. I let this happen because of my incompetence. Even my mother didn't refute my words. She wobbled as she got up, then left the office with slumped shoulders. Even my strong, optimistic mother had given up. Maybe Evergreen Inn truly was. No, it's not. Caroline's voice cut through the heavy silence like a blade. She clenched her fists and then reached out, grabbing my hand tightly. Michael, do you remember? The day I first arrived here? Yeah. That day, I came here chasing after my grandfather. I couldn't let go of my dream of learning to cook from him. But at the same time, I was on the verge of giving up. Huh? I tilted my head in confusion as Caroline's eyes began to glisten with tears. I thought if Grandpa rejected me, it would give me a reason to let go. Deep down, I was hoping for it. Because the world of cooking was so much tougher than I had ever imagined, just as Grandpa had warned me. Caroline. But because of you, Michael, I didn't give up on my dream. And now, I'm truly glad I didn't, because I still love the world of cooking. I love the dishes Grandpa creates, and now, I love Evergreen Inn too. That's why I don't want to hear you say it's over. You can't say that. Her words hit me like a slap across the face. So many guests love Evergreen Inn just as much as I do. The joy of eating delicious food and the warmth of genuine hospitality, those memories are precious to them. There are people who look forward to coming here with smiles on their faces. Don't take that away from them. Don't give up. Tears spilled down Caroline's cheeks. Each of her words cut deep into my heart. She was right. Nothing had been decided yet. It wasn't over. Thank you, Caroline. Michael. I'm sorry. You opened my eyes. As I sat up in my chair and nodded, her tears stopped, replaced by a bright, dazzling smile. Everyone, please gather in the main hall immediately. I announced over the inn's intercom, calling the entire staff together. Uncertainty and worry were written all over their faces. We're going to have a strategy meeting to protect the name of Evergreen Inn and the smiles of our guests. We will not give up, and we will fight back with everything we have. Murmurs spread through the hall. Even so, people exchanged hesitant glances, unsure of what to do next. That's when I called Caroline to stand beside me. Caroline, would you share your idea with everyone? Yes, Michael. She nodded and turned to face the staff with determination. I propose that we hold a tasting event. We'll invite guests for free and let them experience firsthand how delicious and safe our food truly is. A tasting event? My mother, standing at the front, murmured the words to herself. She lowered her gaze in deep thought for a moment, and when she looked back up, her expression was completely clear and resolute. I think it's a great idea. I support it. With the landlady's approval, murmurs of agreement spread among the staff. That could work. Not a bad idea at all. When we took a vote, every single staff member supported Caroline's proposal. That's an incredible idea, Caroline. Let's start preparing immediately. Yes. And so, we decided to hold a tasting event to save Evergreen Inn. Then 3 days later, despite the short notice, more people than we had expected arrived for the event. It was thanks to the entire staff working together, reaching out through phone calls, emails, and social media to invite as many guests as possible. With Caroline leading the charge, the kitchen team worked at full speed to prepare the dishes. As anticipation and tension filled the air, I stepped into the main hall to address the gathered guests. Thank you all for coming to Evergreen Inn today. We are well aware of the rumors that have been spreading about us recently. The main hall fell completely silent, and some guests wore uneasy expressions. Even knowing about the rumors, they had still chosen to come. With deep gratitude, I continued. However, we have spent the past 150 years perfecting our craft and upholding our commitment to excellence. Today, we want you to see that for yourselves. At my signal, the sliding doors opened and Caroline and the other chefs entered, carrying the prepared dishes. A chorus of impressed gasps filled the hall. The dishes were vibrant, their colors rich and inviting, with aromas that stirred the appetite. As soon as I announced the start of the tasting, guests eagerly reached for their plates, anticipation shining in their eyes. And then, it's delicious. Smiles spread across the faces of the guests as they took their first bites. Look at this raw fish, so fresh. There's no way this could cause food poisoning. Evergreen Inn is as amazing as ever. Cheers of delight and the happy faces of those enjoying their meals filled the grand hall. Seeing that sight, a wave of emotion welled up inside me. I was so glad I didn't give up at that moment. That very same day, news of the tasting event spread like wildfire on social media. Guests, moved by their experience, eagerly posted about how incredible Evergreen Inn's food was. The flood of positive reviews quickly drowned out the false accusations, and before long, the people spreading the malicious rumors must have realized they had lost. One by one, their posts started disappearing. And then, I'm terribly sorry, but we're fully booked for the next 2 months. A party of 30 for the year-end holidays? Thank you so much. Evergreen Inn was suddenly overwhelmed with more reservations than we could handle. Large group bookings came in one after another, and we found ourselves scrambling to keep up. For a while, our days would be filled with the best kind of chaos. Caroline, you did incredibly well. The morning after Evergreen Inn had overcome its greatest crisis, Edgar appeared in the kitchen, his back pain now healed. He found me and Caroline cleaning together. Grandpa. Michael, was my granddaughter of any help to you? Yes, of course. I nodded and began to recount Caroline's efforts. How she stayed overnight at the inn, working tirelessly to prepare for the tasting event. How she took command of the kitchen in Edgar's absence and led it brilliantly. How she never lost her smile, even in the toughest moments, inspiring not just the kitchen but the entire inn. And most importantly, she was the one who got me back on my feet. Evergreen Inn is still standing today because of her. I see. Pride shone in Edgar's narrowed eyes. Then gently he placed his hand on Caroline's head and ruffled her hair. You've grown. You've become a fine chef. That's not true. I still have so much to learn. No. Edgar shook his head and then asked her a question. Caroline, do you know what the most important thing is for a chef? Huh? Caroline blinked in surprise, staring into his eyes. With a warm smile, Edgar gave his answer. It's making the people who eat your food smile. And when a dish is made with heart, it has the power to move people. You've done that, so now you are a chef in your own right. Grandpa. Caroline's eyes filled with tears, and soon they spilled over. Edgar pulled her into a gentle embrace, rubbing her back in comfort. Michael, I have something to tell you as well. Huh? Edgar then turned to face me, his expression resolute as he began to speak. Over 50 years ago, I worked here at Evergreen Inn. What? Wait, Grandpa, you did? Caroline and I both gasped in shock at the revelation. Edgar, lost in thought, seemed to be reminiscing about the past as he spoke, his gaze distant with nostalgia. Yes, that's right. Back then, Michael, your grandfather was not only the heir to Evergreen Inn, but also a young chef in training. And I was one of the chefs who worked alongside him, constantly competing with him. They were close in age, had similar builds, and shared a deep bond, not just as rivals, but as if they were brothers. Edgar had affectionately called my grandfather Eddie, looking up to him like an older brother. Eddie cared about the smiles of those who ate his food more than anything else, just like Caroline does now. He was a far greater chef than I ever was. However, Edgar continued, his expression darkening. It was as if he were about to confess a long-held regret. I, on the other hand, believed that profit mattered more than the joy of our guests. I thought we should elevate Evergreen in status by selecting only the finest ingredients, catering exclusively to wealthy patrons. In the end, our differing views caused a rift, and I left the inn. At the time, I even convinced myself that Eddie had used his position as heir to force me out. I even confronted him about it. I was young, arrogant, and foolish. He turned his eyes toward the window. There, the vast garden of Evergreen Inn stretched out before us, a sight the inn had always taken pride in. It was the very place where my grandfather and Edgar had once shared their dream of making Evergreen Inn the best in Japan. Looking back, I don't think my perspective was entirely wrong, but even after becoming the head chef of a prestigious restaurant and being adored by the elite, something always felt missing. In truth, I was far happier back when I was here, working alongside Eddie. Tears glistened in his eyes as he gazed at the garden. With a trembling voice, Edgar revealed the real reason he had come back. It was because he had wanted to work with my grandfather again. But Eddie's been gone for so long now. If only I had set aside my pride and come to see him sooner, even if he hadn't forgiven me. Grandpa. Caroline gently leaned against Edgar's shaking shoulder. At that moment, I made up my mind. It was time to tell him what my grandfather had always wanted to say. My grandfather never held a grudge against you, Ed. What? Edgar turned to look at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Now I understand. You were Ed, weren't you, Edgar? His eyes widened further. How do you? He murmured. My grandfather told me all about you, he and Edgar. The two of you had such similar names that you called each other Ed and Eddie instead. Eddie talked about me? All the time. Even in his final years, he constantly reminisced about Ed. He kept saying he wished he could see Ed again, that he wished you were here with him. He'd tell endless stories about Ed, his stubborn yet incredibly skilled rival. The self-confident chef Ed, who, for all his bravado, was too shy to confess his feelings to the woman he loved. Ed, who, despite his sharp tongue, had always encouraged my grandfather whenever he was feeling down. Story after story, so many that I had almost grown tired of hearing about Ed. Ah! Edgar collapsed onto his knees as if his legs had given out beneath him. I'm sorry, Eddie. I'm so sorry. Edgar's shoulders shook violently as he cried out, reverting to the Ed my grandfather once knew. It was as if 50 years' worth of emotions had suddenly burst forth all at once. I wanted to see Eddie again, too. Please go visit his grave and tell my grandfather I'm home. That's all he ever wanted to hear. Michael. Through his tear-streaked face, Edgar looked up at me. Then, with unwavering determination, he gave a firm nod. Yes, thank you, Michael, and Eddie. And please, stay here at Evergreen Inn. I know my grandfather would have wanted that too. If you'll have me, then I would be honored. And Caroline, you too. Me, you really mean it? When I nodded and said, of course, Caroline's face slowly lit up with a smile, just like the rising sun. And then, with a bright, eager voice, Caroline suddenly dashed forward and threw herself into my chest, exclaiming, yes. Please let me stay by your side forever, Michael. As the seasons changed and the maple leaves in Evergreen Inn's garden began to turn vibrant shades of red and gold, An unexpected event shook the town. Shark Royal Resort, the high-end hotel that had once overshadowed our inn, abruptly shut down. Rumor had it that, without warning, the health department conducted an inspection and found severe hygiene violations and poor food storage practices, leading to its closure. Not long after, an attorney visited Evergreen Inn. Regarding the various acts of harassment committed by Daniel and the claim for damages, would you allow me to handle this case for you? What? Please don't worry. There will be no legal fees. This is a personal request from a certain head chef who once gave us a truly unforgettable experience. At those words, a familiar face immediately came to mind. Now, I have no idea what you're talking about. Despite his feigned ignorance, I knew the truth. Regardless, thanks to this, I later received a substantial sum in damages. As for Daniel, his chain of hotels collapsed one after another, leading to the complete downfall of Shark Resort Group. Seasons passed, and when summer returned, Evergreen Inn continued to flourish more than ever. It had become one of the most sought-after inns, with reservations nearly impossible to secure, and the long lines for our lunch service had become a local attraction. All right, everyone, let's work hard to make another day of delicious meals. Yes, Edgar. At the request of William, who had fully recovered, Edgar officially became the head chef of Evergreen Inn. Under his strict yet nurturing guidance, the younger chefs continued to hone their skills. Caroline, that one. The decorative cuts, right? Leave it to me. Caroline, now Edgar's trusted right hand, had grown tremendously in her craft. Her original creations were even gaining recognition among our regular guests. One evening after work, something felt different. I invited Caroline to the garden. Caroline, there's something I want to talk to you about. Yes, Michael. Perhaps she sensed something. Caroline lowered her gaze for a moment before looking at me with quiet determination. I used to be focused only on one thing, protecting Evergreen Inn. I was determined to preserve its traditions and make sure it didn't fail under my watch. That was all that mattered to me. I see. Caroline listened intently, allowing me to gather my thoughts. But now, it's different. I want to bring smiles to the guests who come here. I want to create a place where you and the other staff can work happily. And on top of that, I still want to uphold the inn's traditions and ensure its prosperity. Do you think I'm being too greedy? Not at all. Caroline quietly shook her head. Then, illuminated by the moonlight, she smiled. I think it's wonderful. You were always admirable, but now even more so. Thank you. If that's true, it's because of you, Caroline. Me? Yes. She had taught me something invaluable, and because of that, I had finally found clarity. Taking a deep breath, I steadied my resolve. Caroline. Yes? Marry me. What? Her eyes widened in shock. I gently took her hand. Then, I quietly waited for her answer. Yes, Michael. Her gentle voice carried through the evening breeze, reaching me like a warm embrace. Then, she softly squeezed my hand in return. I've been waiting, for a whole year. I'm sorry. I finally had the courage to face that terrifying old man and say, "May I have your granddaughter's hand?" As I told her this, Caroline narrowed her eyes slightly, waiting for my next words. Will you walk this path with me, here at Evergreen Inn, from now on and forever? Yes, with all my heart, Michael. With a radiant smile, she threw herself into my arms, and I held her as tightly as I could. I would continue walking forward to protect Evergreen Inn. But from now on, my beloved would be right beside me. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew she would always support me with her unwavering smile. Feeling hopeful for the days ahead, I couldn't help but smile. Preserving tradition while embracing change, both were essential. And when those two elements came together, an unexpected new story began. As the inn's fifth-generation owner, I had always been focused on protecting our legacy, but through Caroline's words, I found growth. We discovered a new vision for Evergreen Inn, one that would allow it to thrive like never before. When in doubt, listen to the voices of those who stand beside you. Picture the smiles of the people you cherish and find the courage to move forward. Because when you do, the path ahead will always reveal itself.